Harris Hale just played at one. He probably didn't have to, but that's the kind of power and pace that he's generating, James, when you get full.
Yeah, exactly. You want to be able to set the batter up, and we've seen that. Want to play the ball or not, when you're on.
Bounce. We've spoken about bounce this morning. I know Stephen Fleming and Craig McMillan had quite a long conversation about that. What are you noticing about the bounce here?
It's steep bounce, isn't it? We've seen Jameson, he's going to get and just manage to abstract it. But the other bowlers what's really noticeable for me, we talked about it after the ball bounces, and maybe over any conditions, which is the over as well, is contributing to that. But the bounce can create some opportunities, but it can also bring about mistakes for a bounce.
Talk about Matt Henry. He's the most talked about bowler in this New Zealand lineup. Well, without a result. I mean, it kind of seems almost.
National security schools held every year. Fair to say, Lateral Raise New Zealand cricketers have come through Christchurch Boys High School, and we were lucky enough to catch up with one of the kids at school. Happy memories?
Certainly happy memories here. So a great school to go to growing up, and yeah, some pretty fond memories in this game during here.
Talk to me about your cricketing experiences.
Third forms all the way through, the first 11 and 4 forms, three left cuts, 2 outline.
Triple A with a group of guys that have played together for a number of years, so I guess many of those friendships have grown and probably still stand today.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think as a young guy, always as your pinnacle at the time. So yeah, definitely the time into these competitions, and for school guys to win competitions, it was special, and sort of a bunch of mates, and you go on to have lifelong friendships. So yeah, it's certainly a really cool time to be involved in cricket, and certainly get for those guys to do.
Yeah, I'm kind of quite overwhelmed as well for the boys to probably take that in, but we're lucky enough to the caps of the boys during the cross college game, and he picture that, he wasn't actually that far away, and the moment when it isn't actually too far away, so it's pretty harder. Pretty cool when I think that New Zealand cricket represents its board. See, famous names when you go through, obviously the Peggy name. A number of guys I played with a few years, Beer Couple, Region 1. There's a number of names.
Here at the also the covers have been on. They've been on for the last 20 minutes, in fact. Although it looks like the ground staff have decided that'll do. Let's get on with the job. Craig McMillan joining us in commentary, and Stephen Fleming won't be far away. Just really intriguing listening to you talk to Tom Latham here. He's obviously a kid who really appreciated his time in a very storied school, in a very storied sporting school back at Christchurch Boys High, and to have success into their cups.
They didn't have the engine power, they exposed flaws in their car concept, and there was that big debate at the start of the year, wasn't there? Did they design a car that got the most out of having that much power, or did just that much power that they had last year cover up some deficiencies in the car? And I suspect it was the latter. So it's not only that they lost engine power, but I think we now realise that the car wasn't good enough as well.
I'd love to see him have a really strong, even relative to what the car could do, final season of Ferrari, but it was terrible. He was well off Leclerc. He had basically a couple of good races. Obviously the highlight was Turkey, where he made up 8 places on the first lap and he got that last gasp podium. But it's just such a shame to see him not sign off on a bit of a high with Ferrari, because regardless of what people make of that as a driver, he's absolutely brilliant when things are right. He's just a really good guy who's so popular in that scene, singing it on the slow down lap and everything. Just to have had a nice sign off. But yeah, lots of.
He was doing his own thing the whole time, basically saying to everybody else, I'm driving my race in a Haas, it's a car that's much slower than you've got. Get on with your race around me, don't hold me up. He didn't bog himself down, he managed it brilliantly. And when I went back to look look at this one to put it forward for a nomination. I was almost disappointed for Kevin that with how far he fell, and then the penalty he got and dropped into 10th, because he ran, if I remember correctly, in the podium places for ages in this race. And I remember thinking at that point, like, he deserves at least sort of a top 6 finish out of this. And I just thought it was a great drive, and maybe the type of drive we didn't see enough from Kevin in his time when Haas was maybe a little bit more competitive. But I thought it was everything, it was all the good things about Kevin, and it was good that in his final F1 season in a terrible car, he did at least get one chance to show what he could really do on a good day.
I think the difference between a driver like Magnussen, naturally, to be fair, the likes of Leclerc's fourth place in Portugal and Ricciardo's podium in Imola, where it's different to the Russell Sakir performance, or even Sainz second in Italy, sort of being so visible at the front. I feel that sometimes victories can fall into two quite different categories. One which is so obviously such an obvious emotive performance. It's on the surface, you have to buy into the brilliance of it because it's happening right in front of you. So Russell acing the start, leading early on, managing everything that race threw at him, even when Mercedes boxed a pit stop and he fell back, he looked like he was still going to win. That mega overtake on Bottas. All of this was happening on a one-off appearance on his first Mercedes.
10th at Imola, on the process, where's Vettel's third place in Turkey? That was an amazing drive. And Michael Zuma says, I'd say Norris's drive to P3 in Austria was the best non-victory in my eye, but I've already explained why I don't think that's correct. So I thought I'd let the counter argument going there anyway, but yeah, George Russell wins it. Well, thanks very much to the hundreds of thousands of you that voted in these polls. Please do continue this debate in the YouTube comments section or the community section of the Racing YouTube channel. We love to hear what you think, and it's great to see the different perspectives that everybody has. And don't forget to check out therace.com, and don't forget the hyphen. Also, our sister podcasts included Bring Back P10s, which tells classic F1 stories, and of course, do also subscribe free to the Race F1 podcast via your podcast supplier of choice, with episodes released at least once a week, and we'll be going strong over the winter. So thanks very much for joining us for this special video podcast, and for all of our output during what's been an amazing year in 2020.
Victoria, every test we take
helps us protect everything we've achieved
and keeps us safe.
Every test helps us feel sure about that sniffle.
keep catching up with mates, go to work safely,
And keep doing the things we love.
So even if the symptoms are mild, we've been tested before.
every test helps.
For testing locations, visit coronavirus.vic.gov.au.
Authorised by the Victorian Government, Melbourne.
IGA's 10 Days of Christmas, December 21. Award-winning IGA half-play ham, $8.99 per.
So I think 11 times and Alpha was ahead of that pack when it comes to the final race results. So Alpha was the strongest in this group. 2 Ferrari engine teams there in Haas and Alpha. Obviously Williams recovering but still struggling. So what did you make of that little battle? It's always interesting when you've got such a distinctive group, isn't it?
Yeah, it was sort of week in, week out, but I'd have to say that probably the combination of the Alpha drivers and the combination of the Haas drivers were probably better than the combination of the Williams drivers. Understand and exploit the maximum of the car you've got. And obviously as the season progressed, most teams stopped doing too much development. So I think as that happened, every team benefited from understanding the car a little bit better. But for Haas, it was a good decision to make, to be honest, because I think they realised they just didn't have the car base to put bits onto it, spend lots of money, and go forward. What was the point of it? So.
Back. We made for an interesting little subplot. So let's move into the midfield now, which is when it gets much more messy to discuss. I guess perhaps we should start with AlphaTauri. They were 7th Constructors' Championship. They were the 7th fastest on average, and they weren't quite ever fully in that midfield battle in terms of the championship points. But race-winning team, consistent point scorers. So even though the championship position isn't great, they've had a decent season, haven't they?
They have had a decent season, and you know, that one or to try to improve that. But sometimes it bites them. Whereas I think the philosophy of the AlphaTauri is slightly different. It's a bit more consistent aerodynamically. It's a car that I think is more driver friendly. I really would love to see Max Verstappen having a run on the AlphaTauri to see what it could do. It might be slow, but I think he's longer over a long run, over getting a tire spin, it would probably end up quicker because the car I think would be allow the driver to be able to exert his talent a little bit more. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. The car, if they have quick drivers, they can get the odd success.
Now, the next team we move on to, it's actually a slightly tricky decision which way to go here, but I think we should go for Ferrari because it was sixth in the championship. But it did interestingly have the fourth fastest car when you look at the averages, but it had these wild performance swings depending on how power sensitive the circuits were. But a pretty irredeemable season for Ferrari, dominated by these engine technical directives, wasn't it, that came over the winter that they contributed to through the clandestine agreement with the FIA.
Yes, it's one of those sort of situations that they got themselves into because, when you talk about Mercedes, for example, Toto Wolff's always on about the fact that they have to push themselves past the extreme to try to compensate for what Ferrari had on top of them before they found out that Ferrari weren't doing it completely by the book. So that's obviously possible. Now, Ferrari should be able to do the same, but I don't think they can. I don't think they will because they're Italian for a start. It's just so difficult. You see it all happening day in, day out with Ferrari. They just don't have that sort of continuity of leadership, of direction, of focus. It just doesn't seem to be there. So something has to happen back at base. It's not happening at the racetrack to actually see them being able to get there. Now, you were saying about the rear end on the Ferrari. Abu Dhabi was one of the tracks I spent a lot of time to find out doing, and that's what was outlawed. Because there was no repercussions for it other than the fact it was outlawed. So they know why they've done that. They know why they went that route, and that's a big asset. It's not just to say, okay, I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to put twice the fuel into the engine. It wasn't a blatant black and white cheat to get more power. They found a simple method or a route around the regulations to get them more power. So by doing that, I think you might have more chance of actually being able to catch up than just having to sort of start again, I suppose you might call it. They weren't very good in 2014 when this all started. They got a lot better in 2015. And, it progressed to the fact that maybe they should have won a world championship or been in closer
To work properly, so that does at least show there's a fundamental understanding underpinning this improvement. So the idea is that should be there in the right direction.
Yeah, they've just got to keep building. I think I suppose the motivation at the end of last season they seemed to have a difficult relationship at the end of last season with Daniel Ricciardo. It didn't seem to be a blending relationship, I suppose. And then, moving on to Esteban Ocon coming in, so that's a new driver, and as I say, in the other seat, a difficult relationship. So where do they head with their development? How do they sort of focus on the direction they're going to go in? I think the opposite's happening this year. They've got Ocon now, he's had a season under his belt, he's proven that he's not lost anything really, but they believe 100% in Fernando Alonso.